Hi, fifth graders. We're here for chapter 18 of One Crazy Summer. Before we start, let's recap chapter 17. Here's what we know so far. So, Delphine and Eunice were placed in this situation last chapter where they had some time to be together without their siblings. It's possible that they're going to maybe start to build a small bond since they have similar roles in their families. We also learned more details about the character Hirohito, such as his background. We learned that he's Japanese and African American. And we learned a little bit more about how he interacts with the girls differently than the boys back in Brooklyn would have. We also learned about Delphine and how she appears to be interested in Hirohito beyond just like a casual acquaintance. She kind of seems to like him, but she's also immature a bit in how she handles it. So that might lead to something in the next or in the coming chapters. All right, so let's continue on. So let's think about our lens as usual. We always want to think about paying attention to certain story elements. We want to think about character, the minor and major characters. We want to think about their traits, relationships they have with each other. We want to think about the point of view of the narrator, any themes that come across, and any changes, whether it be with the character, the plot, the setting, or the lessons as they come across in the story. Okay. So this chapter 18, is called Expert Color Counting. Lynette and Fern figured that since I talked my way inside Cecile's kitchen, I should fight harder for other things, namely, to have a television set in the house. It was bad enough knowing our California vacation wasn't much to hang a back-to-school essay on. There were no Disneyland rides to write about, no Hollywood movie stars in the Safeway store to sign autographs, no surfing at the beach or shaking peaches or plums from fruit trees in the backyard. There wasn't even a long-lost mama hugging and crying at the airport. I soon saw my sister's point. The least we could have was a television set. Cartoons on Saturdays, funny shows after dinner, the evening news, and true crime shows for me, and of course the Mike Douglas show, 5 days a week, because Mike Douglas always had a Negro performer on his variety show. Outside of the flipper incident, we didn't fight over the TV, which would mean less noise to bother Cecile. Just let's stop before we go on. The Mike Douglas show. Here's like a picture we were able to get from the internet about it. So Mike Douglas, he was a host that would have like musical acts and actors and actresses come on his show, much the same way that like the evening talk shows kind of do nowadays, like Jimmy Kimmel or any of those guys. So he would have people come on his show, and so here's one time where it was like John Lennon had Chuck Berry with him. So yeah, it's just this kind of show that people back then would watch for entertainment at nighttime, with a variety of different guests that would come on. So that's one of the shows Delphine would like to watch. If she bought a portable TV set, we could put it in our room and she wouldn't have to see us for hours. Then it would feel like a real vacation, watching hours and hours of Get Smart and the FBI without Big Ma making us turn the set off. Once again, I found my calm, steady voice and brought our demands to Cecile at our next sit-down dinner. That's what protesters did. They brought their protest songs and their demands to the establishment because the establishment was in control. The establishment was someone over 30 years old who had the power. I didn't know Cecile's exact age, but she had to be over 30. That, plus her holding on to the money Pa had given us, had made Cecile the establishment. All we needed were some protest signs and an or else that wouldn't make Cecile mad enough to hurt us. Without the or else, protesters are just people with protest songs and demands who don't stand a chance of getting anything. The only things that Cecile seemed to care about were her poems and her peace and quiet. The only thing that we seemed to care about was our television set. Armed with that, I brought up our sole demand. So in this scene, this kind of shows Delphine's character. It's growing a little bit and maturing here in California. She's still motherly as she always was, but now since her experience with the Black Panthers and the camp, she's also learning to use her voice for a cause. Even though it's a television in this case, but she's kind of standing up now for herself. This signals a change in her. We should keep an eye out for that. She went to her Cecile ready with her reasons, as if her Safeway S was pressed to her chest. She said, "No one needs a television set." "We do," I said. "To catch our shows," Vanetta said. "Yeah," Fern said, "to watch our cartoons." And the evening news, I threw in. You could practically see the whole world on the evening news. And Mike Douglas. That's right, we want Mike Douglas. How else could we get to see Motown groups, James Brown or Aretha Franklin? Ooh, those are some of those popular groups and artists that they would be able to see if they saw the Mike Douglas show. Nice. The Mike Douglas Show wasn't the only place to find colored people on television. Each week, Jet Magazine pointed out all the shows with colored people. My sisters and I became expert colored counters. We had it down to a science. Not only did we count how many colored people were on TV, we also counted the number of words the actors were given to say. For instance, it was easy to count the number of words the Negro engineer on Mission Impossible spoke, as well as the Black POW on Hogan's Heroes. Sometimes the Black POW didn't have any words to say, so we scored him a 1 for being there. We counted how many times Lieutenant Uhuru hailed the frequency on Star Trek. We'd even take turns being her, although Big Ma would have never let us wear a mini dress or space boots. But then there was I Spy. All three of us together couldn't count every word Bill Cosby said. And then there was the new show, Julia, coming in September, starring Diane Carroll. We agreed to shout out Black Infinity when Julia came on because each episode would be all about her character. And here's a little image of Diane Carroll, what she looked like back then in her show, Julia. That must have been really amazing to see a star like that, somebody that the girls could kind of like look up to. They were excited to see that she was the main character in the show, Julia. So a theme, here's a note about theme here. A motif that keeps coming up again over and over is this idea of equality. And the notion that we've seen even back from the airport scene, this us versus them kind of culture of the time period. Here's another example of it. The fact that the girls have to look very closely across a multitude of shows just to find like some of their the people that look like them represented. It's an interesting idea, and it's something that it's nice to see that there's progress there, that Diane Carroll was somebody that was going to be a main character in the show Julia, but it just kind of reinforces the way that things were at that time period back in 1968. So we're going to continue to see what lessons the characters learn with respect to this, and we're going to keep this in mind as we read on. We didn't just count the shows, we counted the commercials as well. We'd run into the TV room in time to catch the commercials with colored people using deodorant, shaving cream, and wash powder. There was a little girl on her favorite commercial who looked just like Fern. In fact, I said that little girl could have been Fern, which made Vanetta jealous. In the commercial, the little girl took a bite of buttered bread and said, "Gee, Ma, this is the best butter I have ever eaten." Then we'd say it the way she said it, in her dead, expressionless voice, and we'd outdo ourselves trying to say it with the right amount of deadness. We figured that was how the commercial people told her to say it, not too colored. Then we'd get silly and say it every kind of colored way that we knew how. We gave Cecile all of our reasons why she should have a television set in her green stucco house. We even showed her how it would give her peace of mind to do her work without us bothering her. And that's a win-win, right? To our reasons, the establishment said, television is a liar and a story, but we weren't ready to give up. The evening news comes on television, I said. That's all true because it's on the news. She grunted. And the weatherman gives the weather report. That's important. Another grunt. And the monkeys do the monkey. Then Fern swung her arms up and down and bopped her head like a go-go dancer. Cecile made a what expression? Flummoxed. Good old Fern. Fern had managed to completely flummox the establishment. And then we started singing our protest song, chewing away at her peace and quiet. Here we come, walking down the street, like Davy Jones, Mickey Dolenz, and the other singing monkeys. The next day when we came back from the center, we found a radio in our room, the cord wrapped around its plastic body. It was a sure enough left by the garbage dump secondhand radio. Vanetta and Fern squealed as if the little colored girl in the commercial were standing in our room eating the buttered bread. So sort of like this is part of the problem, maybe turning to the solution a bit here. So an interesting development. The main problem of the story so far is this, the idea that Cecile is unkind and really doesn't want them there. It's not the mother that they thought they were getting. Now, could there be a crack, though, in Cecile's hard exterior? She bought them this radio, Why did she get them that radio after all? Was it just for the peace and quiet so she could do her poetry? Or is there some element of her caring about the girls? That's something to keep in mind as we read on. So let's go over the chapter 8. Let's review. Who was in this chapter? It was the girls and Cecile only, because they were at home during this chapter. But what new things did we learn about them? We learned about the girls really wanting to get a television, but there was some background there. This idea that they've been looking across all the different television shows to see themselves represented. And And also we learned that maybe Cecile might have a little crack in her exterior where she might maybe possibly care about the girls enough to get them what they wanted. So what seems important here? What are we learning about the problem? We're still learning about the time period and the whole problem that is occurring within that time period of inequality and the idea of us versus them that we were talking about. And also we're continuing with the problem of Cecile not wanting them to be quiet. So nothing super new there, but it's more, more fuel to the fire. We're learning more about Cecile and how she doesn't really treat them so great. But at the end there, she did buy them the radio. So, like we said, maybe there's a change coming on the horizon. How does this chapter connect to what we read earlier? We made some connections when we were thinking about the time period, when we were talking about what was happening in the country at that time. This also connects to earlier when Cecile brought them to the house, this idea that when they're there, they have to be quiet. She has them in their own bedroom. We learned about those details in the earlier chapters, and it's continuing on in this chapter here. So the question we want you to answer is, what does Cecile buying the girls this used radio seem to signify? Why might she have made this gesture? Was it purely selfish, or was it to show the girls on some level that she cared about them? What do you guys think? Use details from the text to support your response. Okay, hope you enjoyed chapter 18, and we'll be back again for chapter 19 next time.